A beautiful sunrise this morning. Absolutely beautiful sunrise this morning. Yeah, look at that sunrise. Morning, YouTube. Beautiful sunrise this morning over here at St. Vrain Park in Longmont. Got to teach my graphic design class this morning, so I'm going to get ready for that. Had my coffee. Anyway, hope you're having a good morning, and we'll catch you a little bit later. That's a pretty cool mural called All Along the River here at St. Vrain Park. I hadn't really noticed it before. Vanlife really changes your perspective about a lot of different things. So today I think I'm going to reflect as I go throughout my day on some of the things and how a lot of my perspectives have shifted over the years through living this life for the last 3. And since taking care of my parents and dealing with all the stuff I've been dealing with at the same time. But it definitely is one of those things that will change how you view lots of different things in different ways. And I value those shifts in perspective because otherwise we get trapped in our own mind bubbles and can't really see the world for what it really is. So I'll share some of the ways that this has shifted for me in various areas today. I think one of the big shifts that I've had to think about in my experience is how I view housing insecurity. When I was renting an apartment or a house, there was always that pressure to think about like making the rent and making sure that bill got paid on time, or the threat of eviction. And many people out there are facing that threat in a very real way. But since I moved into the van and was able to purchase that and get it renovated, and in the years that I've lived in it, I've not felt that pressure at all. In many ways, I feel more housing secure than I ever had living in a house. And so we talk about housing insecurity. Governments will talk about it as a way of talking about homelessness. And I mentioned before, I'm not homeless, I'm houseless. But I don't have that overarching fear of being evicted permanently from where I sleep and where I can eat and have my security. I take that with me. And so that's a big shift. And it's a big stress relief not having to worry about that each month. I have other bills that I definitely have to pay. And that pressure is there. But having the pressure constantly to pay this huge amount of rent and having it go up every year enormously for no good reason, having to be dependent on a landlord to do fixing of anything that breaks, and all those things is actually a much more insecure position. So for those who do live in sticks and bricks, I would say very often those people are more housing insecure than the way I choose to live my life. So on the one hand, while I have certainly a lot less financial insecurity this way, I certainly have to be much more aware of my surroundings, and personal security and safety is a bigger issue. You always have to be aware of who's around you and what's going on. And so there is a kind of a much more immediate insecurity that does happen, and learning to be aware of your surroundings and aware of others, aware of how people perceive you, aware of how vulnerable you are, not only from the neighbors or from other people in your immediate vicinity, but also how vulnerable you are to the whims of governments and policymakers that want to hide our lifestyle and make us hide because it shames them being outside of the financial system that they created and kind of having this hack of living your life off grid and not being dependent on them. On the one hand, makes you more secure financially and more secure in many other physically, but it also makes you insecure knowing that they could change policies on a whim for no particular good logical reason other than they just don't want to see you. And that's a different kind of insecurity, and that tends to go up. So that's also changed a perspective of mine on how to manage the stress of being vulnerable because of the everyday needs needing to be supplied for in um, these ways, and because of some of those areas which insecurity is a little higher. um, I appreciate my faith a lot more. I have to rely very much daily on God's provision through others and through Himself, and in many ways of just keeping me safe and rooted uh, in that and doing that on a daily basis. Whereas certainly I tried very much when I lived in an apartment to have to rely on faith and with different pressures. These pressures are a little different, and you see the hand of God at work in smaller ways sometimes, but just as important ways. This is the public garden area of this park, and in the spring, this area is full of flowers and native plants. It'll be a lot of fun to see and to photograph them when the when the weather turns and they start to bloom. Right now, it's all very dormant, but I'd love to come out here and do some painting. Looking forward to that. So often, when I lived in a house, you would stay in the house and you would not really get to know your neighbors or not really get to know your community. And unless you intentionally did that to leave or go somewhere, you really just sort of encountered the beauty in the everyday spaces and the public spaces and really don't appreciate those as much. I think as a van lifer, I definitely appreciate that a lot more. Many people, even in homes, no matter the living situation these days, deal with a lot of food insecurity, and that has been a shift of the mindset as well. In the van, I can't carry as much food with me. I do have some storage. I have a refrigerator and a freezer, small freezers that I can keep some things, and then I have pantries that I can keep non perishables. But I do also much more appreciate the community services that are available. Loveland's got a great service nonprofit called the Community Kitchen, and they offer meals and to-go bags for food for free to anyone who needs them, and no questions asked. You can get a hot meal, go in and sit down and eat it, or take it with you, or you can also get other meals to go, especially on the weekends. I find that helpful because it can supplement what I eat. And a lot of times it's healthier because they give you a mix of vegetables and meats and other things, and then you don't have to pay for it. So that has been a perspective shift for me in looking for those community resources like the laundry that they do at the library, the mobile laundry. The library itself is a huge resource. The community kitchen, all these types of things in a community or a city of any size helps with that insecurity of those other insecurities that you will get more of in a more defined and minute way by living in this van or living out of a home. We take for granted a lot of those things again when we're living in homes. We don't think about them, we don't need them. We might go to the food banks to stock up if you have the ways to store and cook things. I have limited ways of cooking things and limited storage, so I have to think through those things more often. So that perspective shift on one's daily needs, food, water, um, is a big shift in how I view the value of living in a good community that has some resources. So if you're out there on your own in the city or in a community, or if you're out there living in a van or a car, you you need to learn where those resources are and where you can get them, because they not only save you tons of money, but they save you the insecurity of not knowing where you're going to get those things. And it's a real act of provision that is very, very, very helpful. And so I always now, in my perspective, look in the cities where I'm at, what kinds of resources do they have? Where can you get them? What are the requirements? Do you have to have an address there? Don't you? Are there other stipulations? And so we go beyond dependency from the government again into dependency on the community, which is, I think, a far more effective way of receiving support. So it's changed that perspective as well of where do you get your support if you lack them, or if you're having more immediate needs or more insecurity in areas that most people living in their homes may not face, or they face it in a different way at a different scale. And so those are some big perspective shifts for me as well, living this life as I do. Another big perspective for me since living van life is in how I've shifted my political views. They say that all politics is local, which is never more true than when you are living this way, this tied to a community, and watching how the society treats its most vulnerable citizens. How a society treats its most vulnerable is the gauge by which we can see how a society is either failed or is successful. And I have to say, in our society, we treat our most vulnerable very poorly in general. The political shift for me hasn't been so much between left or right, or what we commonly call the left or right. It has been much more nuanced than that. In many ways, I've become more conservative, and in other areas, much more liberal. I see and live firsthand the results of policies. And I'm not talking about national policies either, because the national political situation is pretty much a sideshow. It has very little to do with what's on the ground here. What really matters is the local situation, what really affects people day to day in their lives right here. And you see it very keenly when you are in a van or living among the people out there and faced with it. In a home, in a sticks and bricks house, an apartment, you don't see as much of that because you're not exposed to it as much. You don't see the injustices that are there that other people experience. You don't live it, you don't experience it. But when you're out here, you do. There are two great errors that the left and the right make, which has brought me more to the center in most respects. And the great error on the right is to discount any systemic issues, to overemphasize personal responsibility. The great error on the left is to make everything a systemic issue and to discount personal responsibility. When you live in this way, you have to balance both of those things. On the one hand, you see where all the systemic issues are and you live them out. On the other hand, you see where the line of personal responsibility is drawn and the effects that making bad decisions have on an individual life. And so you swing back and forth between those things, and we like to identify ourselves with one or the other. But I really find it very difficult in this perspective to identify with either the left or the right. And certainly the political philosophies do make bearing on policy, but it's the policies themselves that make the difference. So I have shifted a lot of those perspectives because of how I live and what I see. And we definitely have to protect the most vulnerable. And we definitely have to become aware of the systemic problems, but we also have to make sure people are empowered and understand their own personal responsibility in this. So it's not one or the other, it's kind of a both and. And this life is full of a both and. So I've had to shift that too, from where I was to where I am now, and I'll probably shift it some more in the future. But these are kind of my thoughts right now and how it has affected those views as well. Well, living in the van has certainly involved a lot of perspective shifts in different ways. These are just some of the ways that my own perspectives have shifted over the years. One thing that hasn't shifted or has only been strengthened is my faith in God. I always knew and know that God is taking care of me every day, no matter what my living situation was. But living in this van life where my needs are much more immediate and life is very different has made me realize so much more about how much I depend on the daily goodness of God and staying close to Him through prayer, through Bible reading and meditation, and how the love of Jesus flows through others and how I can do the same for other people. So that has been one of those perspectives that have actually just strengthened through this experience, not so much shifted. Anyway, I do definitely hope that some of these thoughts are helpful to you if you're finding yourself in a similar circumstance, or no matter your circumstance. Just learning a little bit more about how perspectives can shift in this lifestyle, in this van life thing that we do. I hope that's helpful to you, and if it is, give me a like and a subscribe. I really appreciate it. It helps me so much just to talk to people about this stuff, and I do hope that you get something out of it. Anyway, we'll see you in the next video. God bless.